6 a.m.
Back to school, it's time to think about the requirements schools have for vaccinations. Just a few years ago, Colorado came in last in the country for vaccinations. Now we've moved up to 30th, but we've got some work to do still. So joining us this morning is Dr. John Bender, president of the Colorado Academy of Family Physicians. Good morning, Dr. Bender. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, Cheryl.
So some progress, but 30th is still nothing to cheer about. What do you think's keeping us on that lower end of the rank?
Well, there's a number of different reasons. Part of it is, I believe, apathy. We've been so successful that we're victims of our own success. If you go back 40 years ago, many people in Colorado would know someone who had polio. It might be a family member or a neighbor. And now fast forward 40 years, and many of the millennial mothers who are the ones deciding whether their children get vaccinated don't know anyone with polio, or they may not have seen the illness. And so that risk is not as apparent as it used to be.
Gotcha. You had mentioned to me just a moment ago that there's been a case of mumps recently, so there are still things floating around out there our kids need to be protected from.
Absolutely. Well, a couple of years ago, there was a study done at the Children's Hospital, and they estimated that they incurred costs of around $25 million just treating children who had been injured by vaccine-preventable illness. So these are children getting flu, pertussis, meningococcemia. There are always some deaths every year from vaccine-preventable disease.
Interesting. All right, let's talk about the elephant that's in the room. There are some who fear that vaccines are linked to autism in any way. Talk about that.
Sure. Well, in 2001, thimerosal, the mercury-containing preservative, was removed from the vast majority of these vaccinations. And yet over the last 7 years, the rates of autism have actually increased. So it only makes sense that if this was the cause, we would have seen improvement in the rates. And it's been shown through many different large scientific trials that this is just not scientifically based. The real reason that I think that rates are declining has to do with money and access. So even though we have programs like Vaccines for Children, that's a federally funded program through Medicaid, many Coloradans aren't going to qualify for that. They have insurance. And yet the newer policies oftentimes have larger co-pays or large co-insurance. We get a 23-year-old mother with an 18-month-old and a 5-year-old. She comes into my clinic to get vaccinated, and yes, it's a covered benefit, but she may still have to bear $200 or $300 of that cost.
Yeah.
And with gasoline prices and groceries, it's just hard to make it a priority for some families.
Yeah. But obviously the message today is let's do everything we can to make that a priority for the safety of the kids and their families, because those kids can get sick and then take it home to the rest of the crew.
Well, absolutely. A lot of times we vaccinate our children to protect adults, particularly senior citizens who are the ones that usually succumb to flu.
Yeah.
Now, the exemption process in our state has also been in part of the problem here, because if a family member chooses a philosophical exemption, they're allowed to do so. Unfortunately, that exemption will follow that child through their entire public school career. And oftentimes we're not going back and re-asking the question, do you want to reconsider vaccinating?
So have those conversations with your healthcare provider. It's really an important thing to have, and we're going to have more information for you on the website a little later on this morning. Dr. Bender, thank you for coming in.
Thank you so much, Cheryl.
Appreciate it.
You having
Go to
me.
9news.com as seen on 9 News for much more information, and we'll be right back.